This will probably be our most controversial episode yet because we're talking about reading diversely. Is it fake? Is it important? Do we do it? Should we do it?
Jinx.
Welcome back to the Life on Books podcast. My name is Tony. With me as always is Andy, a.k.a. Metafictional Meathead. Andy, how are you?
I'm doing all right, Tony. I'm a little bit sleep deprived, but...
Same. I slept 2.5 hours last night.
Nice.
I took a stimulant, doctor prescribed, yesterday morning. A stimulant I don't take often, but have taken before, and it just did not wear off.
Yeah.
So I fell asleep around 4:30 and woke up at about 7:30.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Nice.
Before we get into our weekly reading update, the catalyst for this episode was an interesting email that I received from, I guess, a viewer. They said they've only watched one episode, which was the Women in Translation episode, which prompted a quite interesting email.
Yeah.
About how we don't seem to read diversely enough, which I thought was strange considering the topic of the episode that spawned the email.
A lot of the criticism was directed my way too.
It was. So I don't think I'm going to read the email in full, but I'll probably just read excerpts because I do think there were some good discussion points, although many of the opinions were perhaps not fully informed.
Yeah.
I will not be sharing who this person was. You are feel free to comment about anything I read about the email, but obviously just be respectful because there's a chance that this person will probably be reading those comments if they continue to watch the show. So before we get into all of that, though, what have you been reading lately?
Nothing new. Same as last week. The Combinations and Gesell Dome.
All right.
And a little bit of Middle C mixed in, but I will be honest, the last handful of chapters I've read of that have just bored the life out of me.
Oh, man. Andy's love affair with William Gass is coming to an end here.
I mean, I still love The Tunnel. I still love Omensetter's Luck. I still love some of his short fiction.
Yeah.
I have, a couple other collections of fiction that I will read in the future, but...
Cool. I mean, you can't hit a home run every time.
I think part of it too, like I had said last week or the week before, like I kind of had been in a bit of a slump and not doing a ton of reading.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of just, lost the rhythm, and, happens with a lot of books. There's just sections in the middle or whatever where it just kind of, it's not a slog, but it's a lot of development and setting things up and, kind of picking the book up after not touching it for a week or two and being in the middle of that kind of boring section. It's just kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
Like you kind of lose the flow.
It's for sure a slow burn book, which I think was really enhanced for me that I read it, on schedule with the book club.
Yeah.
So I was discussing it with other folks, obviously on Discord and on the live calls. I probably would have enjoyed it less had I not been doing that, although I still would like it, I think. So,
But you've got a mountain, so let's just jump right into that.
The tables have turned the last couple weeks. So yesterday I read Train Dreams by Denis Johnson.
Sticking with the theme of reading diversely, another old white man.
Well,
Well,
I'm doing a video at the end of this month because I'm turning 40 years old this year. And
damn.
I'm going to do a video of like the 40 best books of the last 40 years, but just one for each year.
Yeah.
And this came out in 2011 and I hadn't read anything. And so I was like, well, I can squeeze this in before I do the video because it's only 100 pages and there's a film adaptation coming out.
There's still time for you to read the instructions. I think that came out in 2011.
That's quite a long book, isn't it?
Yeah, but you got 2 weeks. You can read that in 2 weeks.
Sure. Okay. I also read Minor Detail.
Nice.
By Adania Shibli, translated by Elizabeth Jacquet and published by our friends over at New Directions Publishing. You had given me this book.
Yes.
Did you read it? So I'm planning on reading Anniversaries by Uwe Johnson and doing it in line with the dates, which starts August 21st or something like that. So soon.
Yeah.
And that's a big book.
Yes.
And I was like, I want to squeeze in some shorter stuff this weekend. And I just looked through my whole collection and I was like, oh, this is literally the shortest book I've got.
Yeah.
It's from a Palestinian author. I've yet to read anything from Palestine as I read my way around the world. Wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah. No, it's heavy.
Did not know what this book was about. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And even worse that it's based on a true story.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave it at that. I've been reading poems from Refusing Heaven by Jack Gilbert. This I picked up after our poetry episode, which you can go listen to because I decided I should be reading some more poetry. Enjoying it.
Right on.
Still working through How to Quiet a Vampire by Borislav Pekic and translated by Stephen M. Dickey and Bogdan Rakic, published by Northwestern University Press. This book is incredible, but very dense. Our monthly book club read for August, The Kukotsky Enigma by Ludmila Ulitskaya, translated by Diane Nemec Ignashev, also published by Northwestern University Press. Enjoying that. I'm about about a third in. I read the first chapter of Tom's Crossing by Andy's favorite author, Mark Z. Danielewski, and the author of House of Leaves. Feel how heavy that is.
That's nice.
It's like, I weighed it. It's like almost 3.5 pounds. Yeah, I read the first chapter. I would say underwhelmed. I don't want to judge it based on 30 out of 1,300 pages almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, underwhelmed. I've never read anything from him before. I know you don't like House of Leaves, but someone had told you that this was like if Cormac McCarthy had written Lonesome Dove, which on paper sounds cool to me.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It just seemed like Lonesome Dove.
Yeah.
It just seemed like Lonesome Dove. And almost done Moby Dick.
Nice.
I'll hopefully be done with that soon. So that's it for me.
This is. I was excited when I heard about this because as much as I hate on House of Leaves and love to hate on House of Leaves,
Yeah.
there were parts of it that I did enjoy the writing, and then I was joking when someone told me that he had a 1,300 page or whatever it is, Western. It looks like it's like a little over 1,200 page Western. I was like, I wonder what that'll be like, and was kind of joking, like obviously a lot of House of Leaves is the way he plays with the structure and things like that, and I was kind of joking like, oh, are there just going to be like 500 blank pages in the middle that are to kind of simulate the emptiness of the desert around them, and then our friend got his copy and he was like, no, like it's a full novel. It doesn't appear to be any sort of like structural experimentation or anything like that. Like it's just a normal novel. And I was like, oh, I wonder what that's about.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I've never read House of Leaves. I've actually never read anything that he's written. And just based on what I know about House of Leaves, I think I was just surprised by how pedestrian this seemed when I started reading it. And so again, I really don't want to like judge a book based on the first 30 pages when it's literally 1,228 pages long or whatever it is. But I was pretty pumped when it came in the mail. The publisher Pantheon sent me this arc, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna read this. Like it comes out in October. It'll be a good book to read. Like in time with it coming out, because there'll probably be a lot of hype around it. Sounds like it could be cool. And I don't know. I'll see. We'll see. I'm sure I'll kind of chip away at it a little bit here and there and see if it's more my vibe.
Yeah.
If I get to like the 120 page mark, you know, I'm 10% in and it's still not grabbing me.
Then we'll rehome it to Andy's library, Andy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It seemed like a fairly easy read too. It was like not challenging writing. So
Yeah.
Also it's a little weird because it takes place in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I guess I just expected it to be a story from a earlier time period, and something about like the vibe of the writing doesn't feel like 1980s to me.
Yeah.
Like the dialogue seems like too antiquated for 1980s, even though it takes place in Montana or Utah or whatever it is. So,
I mean, I'm kind of drawn in by this first paragraph, but I mean,
I don't even remember what the first paragraph was.
Hard to figure out how so much awful horror could have started out with those two horses and not one yet named, both minding their own business on that spring afternoon near the tree streets. Noise and hay scraps at the back of paddock A, with the new kid minding his own business too, sitting himself real quiet on the fence rail, and just like them horses, also nibbling on a blade of grass. Peaceful as peaceful gets.
Yes. So funny you mentioned that, because this is how tired I am. I didn't even remember that. When I got the book, I just popped it open immediately and just read that first paragraph, and I was like, I'm in.
Yeah.
And then I read the first chapter or whatever, and I was like, I don't know.
So I'm gonna need you to make a decision quick so I can take this from you.
Yeah, I'll read a little bit more of it this week, and I'll let you know. So anyway, today we're talking about. I made a list of questions based on the email that was sent. Hi, Tony. My name is Blank. I'm a reader and writer from Blank. I'm also doing a Read Around the World challenge. I listened to my first full episode of your podcast and interested in perhaps extending the conversation. I acknowledge that this is unsolicited, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So the first thing that this person kind of took issue with was your statement that, you know, the books that I read happen to be written by men.
Yeah.
Now I actually did
books I'm interested in happen to be written by men.
Yeah. They took this to mean like you just happen to like books that men write, in the sense that like you think you like men's books.
Right.
What? And I did defend your honor. I responded.
My hero.
Yeah.
My hero.
And I said, I don't like to speak for other people, but at this point, you know, I think I know your stance on this pretty well.
Yeah.
And you can add any clarification to this if you want for our audience. But I had said what you meant was, of the books that you come across and the genres or movements or categories that they're in that seem to really appeal to you, those books tend to have more male authors to choose from than women's authors. Is that correct?
More or less. I mean, one of the things that I kind of took umbrage with in that email, because obviously you sent it to me and I read it.
Yeah. I mean, it involved you, so I was like, you should read this.
Was there was the person said something along the lines of like, oh, I didn't know authors are writing with their genitals.
Yeah.
And that to me indicates that the point of what I was trying to say was just missed. Mm-hmm. Which I get. It happens. But like I've said that on multiple episodes before. You know, me saying that last week or whenever we recorded that episode was not the first time I have said that. And you were pretty much exactly right. Like, I'm not out at the bookstore like, gotta find books written by dudes. Like, oh, if it's written by a woman, gonna put it back on the shelf. I'm not gonna read it, whatever. Like, and I'm not out here trying to say that like women can't write good books or anything like that, or that women don't write books that I'm interested in or anything like that. Like, I certainly have female authors that I like. There are individual books written by women that I've really enjoyed. There are plenty of books written by women that I would like to read. I don't want to call it a coincidence because that seems kind of lazy, but like, you know, you showed me part of what you responded to this person, and you were kind of right. Like, you know, I like these kind of postmodern tomes or this really experimental work and things like that. And just, some of my favorite books, Gravity's Rainbow, Infinite Jest, JR, The Recognitions, A Bennett Circuity, Crescent Horkai's work, DeLillo's work, they're all just, they're books written by men.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, I don't mean it to be like, like a sexist thing of like, I only want to read books written by men or something like that. Like books that I really like and that I find really interesting and that I kind of want to dig deeper into or get more of a background on or things like that. And those books just happen to be written by men. At no point did I want to convey that like, I don't think a woman could write a book like Gravity's Rainbow.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that Clarice Lispector is probably one of your favorite authors.
Yes.
She's a woman.
Or that,
was. She's passed on.
like I said, like I didn't mean to convey that a woman couldn't write a book like Gravity's Rainbow or Infinite Jest, or that, that type of book doesn't already exist. It's just, kind of like I said, a coincidence. Like I
think like you take postmodernism for example. I would say you're a pretty big fan of postmodern literature.
Yeah.
Thomas Pynchon's probably your all-time favorite author.
Yeah.
You're a huge fan of Infinite Jest, which we can argue about it, but we'll just call it postmodern because it pretty much is. One of the first kind of pieces of content I had put together for the Patreon when I launched it was, what is postmodernism?
Right.
Because anytime I had mentioned it on Instagram or whatever, I'd get a lot of questions like, what the hell is that? I'm not an expert on it, but I thought, okay, I'll put together kind of like a roadmap of reading. I'll do some research on, making define parameters of this so I can build this resource for people. There are just not that many women who have written in the postmodern style or aesthetic.
Right.
That doesn't mean they can't. It doesn't mean the women who have aren't good. I mean, you've read some of their books.
Right.
There's just not a lot to choose from.
Right.
And I think that's, really true of a lot of genres or time periods. And I think it's twofold. I think in one instance, like postmodernism, there's not a lot of like new postmodernism. It's something that kind of has already come and gone.
Right.
And in the era where it was happening, women probably did not have as many publishing opportunities.
Right.
And I also think that there is something, at least in Western civilization, that culturally less women were interested in that type of literature. And so it bore out less women writing those types of books. So it's probably a combination of those two things.
Yeah. I think part of it too is, there was some misinterpretation of what I meant by interested in. And again, to go back to what I said earlier, like I didn't mean that I don't have any inclination or interest in reading books written by women, but it should be very clear to anyone that's listened, especially, for a while and more so recently, like I don't have any sort of like specific reading projects or reading goals beyond reading the books that I want to read. So this and there are plenty of books that, like I said earlier, like written by women that I would like to read, but right now, most of the books that are kind of on my mind, whether they're ones I'm currently reading or, would like to read soon, are just written by men.
Yeah.
And, I think you and I are kind of on the same page in the idea that, like, I'm not just going to read a book by a woman to check off a box and say that so I can say, like, oh, yeah, I read more books by women this year than I did last year. And that's not to diminish anyone that wants to do that, because certainly that would, I think, falls under this idea of reading diversely that we're sort of talking about today.
We're going to get to it.
We're going to get to today. But like a good example is Miss Mackintosh, My Darling. And that's certainly kind of...
Who's the author?
Marguerite Margaret Young.
Right.
Based on everything I've heard about it, it kind of, falls under that sort of, I don't know if postmodern is the right word, but that kind of epic encyclopedic novel, maximalist novel that has a lot of the qualities that I really like, similar to the authors that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And yes, I would really like to read that at some point. But most of the, the books I'm thinking about that I would like to read soon, Schadenfreude, Shadow Ticket, Bomarzo, Empty Wigs, maybe Tom's Crossing when you give up this copy, The Public Burning, like those are just all books written by men. And life is too short to read books that you're not overly excited about, or, to not read books you are excited about. And all of those books that I just listed off are books that I'm excited at the idea of reading. And I certainly would like to read something like Miss Mackintosh, My Darling, or, I have another collection of like Juna Barnes's short stories. Like I would like to read those, but right now.
And you have read Juna Barnes.
I have read Juna Barnes, but like right now I'm just excited to read these other things. And, I feel secure enough in like the, acknowledging that women's rights are currently in jeopardy. Things have not been great for them in a number of different ways over the last, as long as humanity has been a thing.
Yep.
Go
read Minor Detail.
Right. And have acknowledged, try to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And I have said before that have acknowledged before that I probably have not read as many women authors as I could. But I also feel like there are other ways that I can acknowledge the, suffering of or the plight of women without having to, change my reading habits.
Yeah. As I've mentioned before too, I think there's a big difference between never having done and not currently.
Right.
One of the things that, and I do think this email that I got, came from a good faith position.
Yeah, certainly.
But one of the things that just frankly annoyed me about it was that we had said, I think I had said, since the last time we did a Women in Translation episode, I've read 10 women in translation. And you were like, yeah, maybe it was like 5 or 6 or 7 for me or whatever. And then this person said, you've only read 10 books by women out of 100, so 10%. And it's like, well, first of all, no. I don't read 100 books or more a year.
Right.
I read maybe 50, maybe 60 at best. I think 60 is probably like my all-time and my personal limit given my current circumstances.
Right.
So right away, we can double that to 20%, right? And then when you factor in, that was specifically talking about women in translation. I've also read books in the past year written by women in English.
Right.
So I did look at it, not recently, but at the end of last year, I did look at it. And I want to say I had read like 41% or 38%, somewhere right in there, just above a third of my reading, between a third and a half of my reading was books by women. I'm totally fine with that.
Right.
If you think it should be more, off. I have nothing else to say about it than that.
Right.
Because that is, in my opinion, what I call little Hitler behavior.
Right.
When you are trying to be a dictator of how other people spend their time. And you've set some arbitrary goal for someone else. And there are very few things in my life that are more precious to me than my reading time.
Right.
I don't know if you saw this, but recently this guy passed away and he left behind his physically written reading journal. And I think all it was like the name of the book, the date that he read it, and like whether he liked it or not. Or
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even know if he gave it a star rating or whatever. But he was in his late 70s or early 80s. Did you see this?
No.
Oh yeah, it was cool. And like I think like his local library like published it online. And the guy read like 3,200 books. Lifelong avid reader. That's not that many.
No.
You know what I mean? Like there are millions and millions and millions of books. There are certainly tens of thousands of great books that are worth reading. And like you'll get to maybe a third of them at best. And so reading time is like super precious. So I really don't care if somebody thinks that like, oh, Tony, you read only a third of the books you read were from women. Like that's not good enough. Maybe that's good enough, not good enough for you. So I encourage you to read more than a third.
Right.
And the way I kind of think about this is like, it's also a problem if you flatten people into boxes to check. So for example, do you think a black author would be happy if you and I were like, yeah, I read this book because the author's black?
Right.
Probably not.
Probably not.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of different people that are black. They might have different takes on it. But generally speaking, I think someone would much prefer me to say, the synopsis of this sounded killer.
Right.
The title grabbed me and hooked me. I loved the cover art. My friend hyped it up to me and I wanted to read it. You know, it's like, I think of like Passing by Nella Larson. You know, if I was like, yeah, I read this because I needed to read a black woman's book this month. It's like kind of, you're commodifying people.
Well, the thing is, and this is very easy for me to say as a young, straight white man that has more or less, you know, experienced the privileges that come with that. But at a certain point, it kind of creates the question, are you reading diversely or are you reading performatively?
Absolutely.
Because, again, am I reading books because if I grabbed, so I guess you talked about this, I read Minor Detail. And, I heard about it and, I knew it was from a Palestinian author. I knew it had to deal with that, everything going on, both past and present.
Yep.
But the synopsis also sounded really good, and it kind of was a twofold of like, this sounds like a good book that will be worthwhile to read, and it also sounds like it will expand my worldview. So there's enjoyment and there's, I guess for lack of a better term, education out of it, right?
Yep.
But if I was just like, oh, Palestinian woman, sick, like then
So
if I'm just just picture me at the coffee shop being like, yep, see everyone,
right.
It's by a woman.
Yeah.
It's not white. It's by a Middle Eastern woman. Like how,
right.
Look at me. I'm, and that's how, and again, there are plenty of people that I know online that have made an effort to read more books written by women, which I think is admirable. And I don't mean to criticize that, but like when people send us emails like this or leave comments like that, it's just like, what do you want from me?
Well, that's the thing is, so I actually did a Google search on women in translation podcast episodes.
Yeah.
Now, this was one search. I poked around the first page of Google. There was one other that's come out this year that I could find. This was our second year doing it. And I think this matters. The folks who did the other episode that came out this month, it was a podcast hosted by women. So it's like, find me another podcast of just two dudes
Right.
doing a women in translation month. Again, maybe it's not to your personal standard and satisfaction. That's your right to feel that way. But I think you might be kind of like barking up the wrong tree. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
is the problem that guys who are talking about women's books aren't talking about them enough? Or is it that there's a lot of guys that don't even f***ing read?
Right.
And going back to what you had said about like, you don't pick up a book and go, oh, this is written by a woman, like I'm out. Or like, you don't pick up a book and go, oh, this is written by a man, like great, you know?
Right.
Going back to the passing analogy, you know, if I had said to you, like, hey, do you want to read a book by a black woman? You'd probably just be like, I don't know, like, what's it about?
Right.
Right. And then if I said, but if I took passing and I said, Andy, do you want to read a book that's basically like a psychological thriller ahead of its time that talks about a black woman who's able to pass off as white when segregation was still a thing? You'd be like, yeah, that sounds cool.
Right.
Now, if I said to you, there's 2 books with that exact topic, would you rather read the one by the white guy or the black woman?
Probably the black woman.
Probably the black woman, right? So like context matters, and we're making choices based on that in those contexts. Not that there's another book like Passing, but you know, just for an example. So,
well, to go back to that kind of point of like, you know, would you rather read a book like that written by a white man or a black woman that has, in theory, lived the experiences that are going to be talked about in that book? And kind of on the idea of what I was saying earlier about something like Minor Detail, where there's entertainment, so to speak, as entertaining as a book like this can be.
Yeah.
Because it's a tough read.
It's engaging.
It's engaging. And engagement and education. I remember having a conversation like this with somebody way back when we were still at the gym. Because at the time, I think I had either just finished or was actively reading Mason and Dixon by Thomas Pynchon. And yes, Thomas Pynchon is an old white dude.
Mm-hmm.
But like the whole theme of that book and a book like Warlock by Oakley Hall, another white guy, right? The whole kind of idea of those 2 books is that history is largely made up. Like it's not fake, but like we have to step back and examine who controlled the narrative, who wrote the history. You know, was it all like secondhand accounts and old white dudes, you know, altered the story so that they would look good,
right?
Or, you know, vulnerable people would look bad, you know, whatever. And it's certainly not to say that, you know, you can just get by reading books by old white dudes and get all of this new perspective on life and things like that. But at the same time, you can still get that kind of altered worldview by reading authors that fit more of your that are more similar to you.
Right. So this segues perfectly into the main question of today's episode.
Let's get into it.
Which is, what do you think reading diversely is? How do you define it? And do you think that you do it? And is it important to you to do it? And how important is it or is it not to you?
I think if you asked most people, they would say that reading diversely is kind of along the lines of, you know, what we sort of talked about in the Women in Translation episode, or what we sort of talked about at the top of the show, where you're reading more books by, I'll just say marginalized people. Mm-hmm. You know, it could be authors of color, male or female, books written by women, whether in English or in translation, mm-hmm. Books written in translation, you know, could be men, could be women, could be from Europe, Asia, Africa, wherever. or books written by, LGBTQ people who, generally speaking, for the last, again, basically all of humanity, have not really had much of a voice, which I don't think is an inaccurate description. Certainly, if you did all of that, that would be reading diversely. But I think it also extends to just ideas in general, like authors like Pynchon and Wallace kind of get roped in the same category because they sort of have similar maximal styles. Same thing, Gas and all of those other authors that, but if you step back and you kind of look at them under a microscope, there's differences there.
Reading Infinite Jest is a vastly different experience than reading Gravity's Rainbow.
Right. And the same thing with something like, The Instructions by Adam Levin and all of this other stuff. And I'm kind of digging myself into a hole here by just listing a bunch of white dudes and saying their books are all different. But
I think it's relevant, though, and I'll get to it in a minute.
What I'm getting at is I think it comes down to ideas and themes, and you can read diversely. You can read a wide variety of ideas without having to, paralysis by analysis yourself into like overthinking the author's background.
Yeah.
And I would certainly like to think that I try to read diversely. I would say I could do a better job. That's life. I mean, it's important. I certainly would be, as much as I love Thomas Pynchon and want to, keep digging into his work and understand it more, I would probably go nuts based on the repetition, or I guess the repetition, and B, the content. If all I read was Thomas Pynchon, I read Gravity's Rainbow and I kind of went down this rabbit hole of like, I want to read all these other things that influenced or inspired him or what have you. And I think that's where, at least from my perspective and how I approach reading in general, that diversity kind of comes in. We talked about this probably when we did the poetry episode and presumably in the past before, but like Rilke was a huge influence on Pynchon and is referenced multiple times in that book, particularly the Dunio Elegies and Sonnets to Orpheus. So I went and read those two before I did my second read of Gravity's Rainbow. And that's where I think, for me, the diversity comes in, is where read something like that, Gravity's Rainbow, that is, which was written by an old white dude, but it has other influences, and you kind of explore those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Because certainly, and Rilke was a European white guy, maybe, for anything other than financially, not really a marginalized person, but vastly different from Gravity's Rainbow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you hit the nail on the head where I think the reading community in general thinks of reading diversely in terms of the mostly inalienable qualities and characteristics of the author.
Right.
Their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, maybe their economic status. I think that's part of it. But I think that if that is your only operating definition of it, you are failing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a big kerfuffle on Book Talk right now where this woman made a video calling out Book Talk bros who read Brandon Sanderson and Stephen King, and I don't know what these people read, but basically saying, oh, you guys only read straight white men's books, and so therefore you are lacking empathy and emotional intelligence, which is a pretty big leap in my opinion. But what I think is interesting is that like the people who were kind of like in agreement with this take are also mostly just reading like books you could probably buy at Walmart.
Right. Here's the thing. Would you rather I read a book like Mason and Dixon that, like I said earlier, blatantly calls out that history is fake and is controlled by the people that want to look good? Or would you rather I check off a box and say I've read books written by women and read Sarah J. Maas and has written the same book 12 times?
Right.
Because I know what I'm going to pick. I know what's going to educate me and make me a more well-rounded person that wants to explore other things.
Yeah, that's kind of my point is like, if you stacked up, you know, I got 5 or 6 books here, right? If you stacked up 6 fantasy books, one by a man, one by a white man, one by a black man, one by a white woman, one by a woman of color, one by a queer person, but they all were published, let's say, in the last 5 to 10 years, versus my stack, which is contemporary fiction by a Palestinian woman, poetry collection by, I think, a white guy, a very philosophical text written by a Serbian in the 70s, a woman who wrote I would say, like quasi magical realism, science fiction, and an 19th century classic, also by a man.
That's diverse.
Who's more diverse?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like the if you are only reading books by straight white dudes exclusively, it's a little suspect.
Right.
It's a little suspect. And it's not that all straight white men are exactly the same or write exactly the same way or have exactly the same influences. However, they do have probably some overlap of their life experiences due to being straight, white, and male. But that is not the only characteristics that define these people as human beings.
Right.
And so, like, I could turn this around on somebody, and not the person that sent me the email, because they are also trying to read books from every country, so they're probably reading a lot in translation. But a lot of these people who would maybe try to call someone like us out and say, oh, you need to read more diversely, only written books written in English. How is that diverse?
Right.
Like, do you think that being a straight white dude from America born in the 80s is the same experience as a straight white guy who was born in Stalin's Russia? Like, probably not.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think it's part of it, but it's not the only thing that you could qualify as diversity. And so I think the problem is like, you could then, based on all of this information, come up with any goalposts you want and then move them for people and say, you're not doing good enough.
Right.
Right? Like in this case, we literally sat down, did a whole episode specifically about books written by women from other countries.
Right.
And this person, that triggered this email, this, hey, you guys aren't reading critically or diversely.
Right.
That's a little,
I think too, it also
crazy to me.
Kind of, implies that the only thing anybody can be doing to, be diverse or educate themselves or what have you is read. And that's not true.
Right.
There are presumably plenty of people out there that love Brandon Sanderson and only read Brandon Sanderson. But when they're not reading, they go out and they protest for abortion rights and for women to have the same rights as men, for gay people to have the same rights as everybody else, for trans people to have the same rights, for Palestine to exist, like all of these things. And that's the thing is like, for some people, reading is just an escape from how horrible the world is.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't think it's fair to, and there are certainly people that are obsessed, probably people that are obsessed with Brandon Sanderson and only read his works and then get on some 4chan forum and drop the N-word and talk about how much they hate women or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's fair to assume that someone is doing that just because you see that their Instagram page or their Goodreads account is mostly books by men.
Right. This segues perfectly into this next excerpt that I want to read, which is, I would have assumed the purpose of reading fiction was to experience points of view not accessible to me personally. So, Andrew, what do you think is the point of reading? And follow up to that, why do you read? Top 2 or 3 reasons why you read books.
I mean, part of it is that. Excess viewpoints that I don't understand. Part of it is just enjoyment and escape from how fucking awful the world is.
Yep.
And, you know, there's all the other various mental health benefits, personal education, personal growth, blah, blah, blah. And I just like it. And, you know, I believe the person in that excerpt said kind of the same thing about like, what could I possibly know about what it's like to be on a whaling ship in the 19th century? How was that an experience that I connect with? Certainly I have the same level of experience being a ship captain or on a whaling ship in the 1800s as I do being a mother.
Yeah, let me just read the paragraph in full for our audience to have context. I would have assumed the purpose of reading fiction was to experience points of view not accessible to me personally, but okay, I see him trying to frame this to be about what is interesting to him. Perhaps what he is saying is that female narratives are not that interesting to him. That's pretty sweeping, right? 54% of the world's population is not interesting, or is it perhaps hard to imagine yourself in the narrative? Well, if you can put yourself in the shoes of a whaleboat captain, a Japanese war general, or a tennis star, you can put yourself in the shoes of a woman. Is it only certain stories, say narratives of power and social structure, that interest you? Is it the writing style that uses strings of detail rather than emotional inner worlds, so you have space to make up your own mind about what you feel? What really specifically do you like or not like in a book? That's a good question, which I want to actually for both of us to answer, but I want to point something out here. First of all, as you mentioned, accessing points of view other than ones that you have available to you is a reason to read.
Right.
It is a reason that I read. It is not the only reason that I read. And I thought this next part was very interesting about seeing yourself in the narrative. I don't read books that way. I do not read books that way, generally speaking.
That's such a solipsist view to take. Like, you are not the center of the universe.
Correct. I do not read Moby Dick and think, I feel like I'm on a whale ship. I just don't.
Right.
Maybe that was what I'm supposed to do. Maybe that's how Melville wrote Moby Dick. But that is not how I read books. I did not read Minor Detail and feel like a Palestinian woman driving around looking for a museum. I don't. and this is what's very interesting to me about this. It's actually a bit contradictory, and I'm not trying to be cruel to this person, but this is a long email with a lot of kind of accusations, if you will. When they said that women can write any types of books, they don't write with their genitals. Okay, let's take that logic then. If we are reading a book written by a man about a woman, would we not then be able to put ourselves in the narrative of the woman? Like, that's a double standard, right? Like,
right.
If women can write any type of narrative, then so can men, and vice versa. And I totally believe that. I believe that women and men can write anything that they want. They're not precluded in any way due to their gender or sex.
Right.
So if that's true, and then I can use these books to put myself in the narrative of the characters, then I can read women's perspectives written by men. Now, to be clear, if I'm reading a book that's very heavily relying on the perspective of a woman, my preference is to read it written by a woman, because
Agreed.
I do think that they will probably do a better job of it because they've lived those experiences. But a man could do a lot of research and get probably fairly close. Just like I don't read books by women that have male characters and go, ugh,
right.
A guy would never say that. In fact, we had that to say about Rock, Paper, Scissors that we read for the book club by Naya Ait. It was like, a lot of us were like, man, she nailed it. Like, how much of a loser this guy is. Like, she nailed the male psyche here.
Right.
So.
But to go back to the point of that about, like, the lived experiences of women who then write books about those experiences. I've read books by women about the plight of motherhood. Mm-hmm. Just struggling with it. Women who wanted it and then were struggling with it. Women that weren't sure if motherhood is something they wanted to experience, but felt like they had to because the pressures that society puts on them. And they were certainly eye-opening and good books.
Yeah.
But I did not like them as much as I liked Moby Dick. And that's not because I went and read the first, read to a chapter. Ew, mothers. Gross.
Right.
Like, the book didn't click with me.
Yeah.
And sometimes that happens. But it was a great book, or they were good books. And certainly if you asked me, hey, Andy, have you read any good books lately about, a woman who kind of had all these aspirations for her life and then got married and had kids and now is just reduced to being a mother? I would say, yeah, I read some books by Annie Ernaux that really covered that. But it certainly was not like, oh, I don't see how this experience applies to me. This book sucks.
Right.
And on the same token, I've read a book that was about a teenage girl that was temporarily institutionalized for, mental health struggles. And that book was awesome.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is not the perspective of the author or the characters that is like the deciding factor. It's everything else in the book. Like, again, so like I said, there's some of, like, one of Annie Ernaux's books. The writing was fantastic. And like I said, it was about this woman that ultimately was reduced to motherhood. And then
not that there's anything wrong with motherhood.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Let's just put that out there.
We
do need to be very clear.
That's why I put I'm reduced in quotes.
For those listening, listening only. Andy's doing air quotes.
And then, and it was a good book.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly, kind of tried to understand the protagonist's perspective. And then I read What Kingdom by Fine Grable. Apologies if I'm pronouncing that, who's a Danish author, which is the book I was just talking about a teenage girl that was institutionalized. And that book was just so moving.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have experience with any of those things. I'm not a woman. I'm never going to be a mother. I'm not a teenager anymore.
Yeah.
I have yet to be institutionalized for my
coming soon
deteriorating mental health.
Yep.
But just something about the way the book was written and the way the author, you know, her style, the emotional tension that she captured just floored me.
Yeah.
And
I can think of similar examples.
Sometimes that's just how it goes.
Yeah, I think like Yuko Tsushima, Woman Running in the Mountains, I read. And it was about becoming a mother, a young mother out of wedlock, which in the time period of Japan that, you know, this character was living in was not kind of culturally acceptable. It was fine. The writing did not wow me, and I did not connect with the subject matter for a number of reasons. But it was fine. I wouldn't say it was bad. It just wasn't the right book for me. And then you have a book like Pachinko by Min Jin Lee, which isn't exclusively about women or motherhood, but that is, I would say, a very central theme.
Right.
I loved that book. I thought it was great. So it's not, I guess, to answer my own question, I mean, you already kind of covered it, like, why do you read? I thought about this a lot over the last couple of days when I kind of came up with these discussion questions based on the email. And I think a lot of it is just post hoc rationalizations that people make.
Right.
I just read because I like it.
Right. Exactly.
If I learn something, great. If I can gain a new perspective, great. If I can find more empathy for a person or a culture or a group of people that I didn't know existed or have much empathy for before, fantastic. But if I don't do any of those things and I'm just like, holy, that's an incredible sentence.
Right.
That's good too, you know? Like, I just like to do it.
Right.
When I read more, I feel better. When I read less, I feel worse. That's kind of it for me.
To go back to the public burning that I mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to read that because, Robert Coover, it's a white dude.
Yeah.
Another one,
Yeah.
a guy that has presumably lived similar experiences to me.
Right. Probably not, actually.
I want to read it because a fictionalized retelling of the trial of the Rosenbergs, narrated by a caricature of Richard Nixon,
Right.
sounds hilarious.
Yeah. Who's one of our nation's worst presidents.
That
in history.
sounds
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah.
And no part of me is going, a woman couldn't write this.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, a woman hasn't.
Right.
If someone
Actually, if you know someone that, send it our way.
right, if you can tell me of a book written by a woman that has the same exact plot or a similar plot, let me know.
Yeah.
At no part of me is like, I don't want to read books written by women. There are just books that I am currently interested in that I think sound really good that are written by men.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read them because guess what? Life is short. I recently had a brain tumor that could have been significantly worse.
Yes.
And I'm not going to let some stranger on the internet tell me that my reading habits are problematic.
Right.
Because I could be dead right now, but I'm not. So I'm going to read what I want to read.
Okay, so just kind of going over my discussion questions. What are the reasons that you read? We just covered that. Do you see yourself in the characters of the books you read or the books themselves in a broader sense? I think both of us. Sometimes. But mostly for me, no.
That's not why I'm reading.
Right.
But sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are books that I did appreciate because I could relate to the characters, but there are also characters that I have literally nothing in common with that I also liked.
Right.
And was interested in reading about that character's story, but did not did not see myself as that character in any way.
I think it also comes down to like you can relate to things characters are going through without relating to the specifics of the character.
Right.
You know, a great example of this for me, a recent example of this for me was when I read Dune. Frank Herbert, white dude. I'm digging myself deeper.
Famously white.
I'm digging myself deeper into this hole.
Yeah.
There is almost nothing that I have in common with Paul Atreides.
Right.
I'm not a potential messiah that's going to save this world or, you know, whatever planet I'm on. My father was not a duke. I'm not about to become the emperor and start a holy war or whatever, right? But, and I'm sorry, I'm going to spoil part of the book, but there is a passage in that book when Paul finds out that his father died. And has this weird kind of emotional struggle where he's sort of focused on what that means for him going forward. He kind of sees that like, oh, now I'm the head of this family. And, you know, he's already kind of started to experience things about being like a potential messiah and things like that. And kind of has these visions of like leading a holy war, right? But at the same time, he's sort of racked with this guilt of like, why am I not mourning my father right now? Like I just found out my father died, and all I'm thinking about is how now I have to lead this group of people.
Right.
I'm not stopping to process and grieve that my father's dead. And not to that extent, you know, my dad is still alive, not to that same extent, but I've had those moments before where like feeling like I should be focused on something else. Like I should be more vulnerable, I guess, or I should be like grieving this thing, but instead I'm focused on something else.
Yeah.
So no, I don't have anything common with Paul Atreides.
You don't even necessarily see yourself
as Paul
in that character's role, right?
But I have experienced that emotion before.
Right.
So
yeah,
you don't have to relate 100% to the character. Sometimes you just read a passage of what this person has gone through and you're like, yeah, I get that.
I mean, even in Middle C that we recently read, I would say the protagonist is quite a despicable person, but there's times in the book that I feel bad for him.
Right.
So yeah, it's, I just don't think it's like it's that two dimensional, you know?
Right.
Okay. So what other reasons you read? Do you seek characters? What do you think reading diversely is, and do you do it? Okay. So what do you think is your biggest quote unquote blind spot in reading, and how much weight and importance do you put on that?
I mean, I've said this earlier, and I think it's appropriate in the context of this episode and the episode that led to this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I will be the first person to tell you that I have not read enough books by women, or that I could stand to read more.
Here's a question for you, though. You read more books than I do typically.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to bet that you've possibly read more books by women in a sheer total number than I have, but I probably have a higher percentage of the books I have read be from women.
Probably. And I probably have read more books by women than I realize.
So this is what I'm getting at here. In this instance, which of us has read more, let's just call it diversely for this example. That's why I have such a problem with like this quota and this box checking. It's like, you've read more, we'll just say it. We'll just assume that this is true. You've read more books by women. I've read a higher percentage of my reading is spent reading books by women. Who reads more diversely? Like, it's a dumb question.
Right.
Because I think it highlights how ridiculous it is to kind of go through these exercises of like, oh, I have to read this many books by women or this percentage. It's like we're both doing it.
Right.
We're both doing the thing.
Right. To answer the second part of that question,
Yeah.
how important is it to fill
Yeah.
to catch up to that blind spot? To be perfectly honest, it's not.
Yeah, I
To
think
me,
that's okay.
It's not. If I read, I don't have no idea how many books I've read this year. Let's say between now and the end of the year, I read 6 more books. And they're all written by men. I can almost guarantee you that I'm not going to go on January 1st. Ooh, the last 6 books I've read were by men. I should read one by a woman. I'm not. But if I read 6 books through the end of the year and they're all written by men, but I spend all of December thinking about Miss Mackintosh, My Darling, I might read Miss Mackintosh, My Darling in January.
Right.
And that's how I approach reading. Not like, oh, I have to do this thing so I can get on my soapbox and tell everyone how diverse and woke I am.
Yeah.
I'm going to read what I want to read, period.
So this brings me to another point of the email here. And this was kind of just in passing, so I don't know how much weight we can put into this, but they asked, it's your job to read critically, right?
No, it's not.
No, it is not.
It's not.
Actually, it is not. So
We probably lose money doing this. It's not a job. It's a hobby.
right.
I'm doing this for enjoyment.
Right. So I understand the perception that many people have when they are mostly a social media user and not a creator, which is, okay, we have nice cameras, we have nice lighting, we have nice audio, we have some of an audience. You might think that this is like some professional thing. This is not. This
Right.
is 2 friends who read as hobbyists,
2 meatheads talking
Right.
about books.
who wanted to carve out some time to talk about books together. And we've talked in the past about how it's been a great experience because not just because people are enjoying listening, but like in this day and age, how often do you just sit down and have a conversation with somebody about a specific topic?
Right.
Most of us are on our phones. Even if you're going out doing social things, you might be looking at your phone. Like we're pretty much locked in for these convos. So it's great in that aspect. It's super important to me if I can encourage other people to read. It's super humbling and validating when people reach out and say, I hadn't read since I was a kid and I stumbled across one of your videos and you made reading seem cool to me again.
Right.
That's great. But that's like not like, I don't own a business that's like, that's our service that we provide. Right. So,
I certainly like to read critically and try to put myself in a position so that we record these podcasts or so that when I'm talking to someone on Instagram or whatever, I have coherent thoughts to share about whatever the topic is, whether it's something more abstract like this or it's about a specific book. But sometimes work is really challenging. I'm training like a dog. Other things in my life aren't going great.
right.
And I'm mentally fried.
Yeah.
And I want to read a very basic narrative and just enjoy the story. Or I don't even want to read.
Yeah.
I want to watch It's Always Sunny.
Or the Red Sox game.
Right.
Yeah.
Which we gotta.
What time is that on?
They're on at 1:30. We got time.
Right.
But like,
yeah, I mean, I certainly try to create videos that people are going to want to watch. And if I can tweak something about how I do it that's going to boost the views and get more comments, I will do that. But I am still selfishly creating all of these videos because I like to do it. If I did not like to do it, you could not get me to do it. Even I make a little bit of money from doing this. And maybe the amount of money that we'll call it revenue because who even knows what my costs are, right? But like, that number might seem very like, oh, that's more than a little bit of money. But like, if I didn't like doing it, even if that was a lot of money, like I wouldn't do it. I'm not the type of person that can do things I just don't want to do.
Right.
So it's not my job. I do try to expose people to things that they aren't going to get other places. But again, that's like kind of somewhat selfishly because I like getting comments like, bro, your videos are sick. I've never seen anyone talk about this book before. Like, I'm so glad that you're not just talking about the same 10 fantasy books over and over again. I don't know. I think it's cool. You know, it blows a little smoke up my ass. I'm like, that's sick. You know? So it's not our job. I'll answer my own question here for blind spots and how much weight do I put onto it. For me, it's actually quite a simple question. The biggest blind spot is literature from Africa. I've read some South African stuff, which was from a white person, so you can argue about, you know,
Right.
There's certainly a conversation to be had about that. I've read a book from Nigeria, and there's probably one or two more in there, but it's sparse.
Right.
How much weight do I put on that? Also, like you, not a lot, but maybe for a different reason. And part of that reason is like, again, we can move these goalposts any way that we want. And someone could say like, we could do an episode about Moby Dick. And someone could say, well, you guys think it's this great book, but you haven't read Tolstoy and you haven't read Virginia Woolf and you haven't read this and that. And so like, in order for you to make these claims, you're not well read enough to do that. So for that viewer, we are potentially not diversified enough in this category, right?
Right.
And so someone could look at me and be like, Tony, you've read, we'll just call it 3 books from Africa. Like, you're not reading diversely. And it's like, okay, but you know what? I've been reading a lot of books from Asia and a lot of books from South America and a lot of books from Europe. Like, there's only so much time in the day.
I haven't read any books from Africa.
Right. There's only so much time in the day. And I've been a reader mostly my whole life, but there was a number of years where I read zero fiction. I was reading weightlifting books, both history and like actual training methods. I was reading business books. I went through that same phase I think a lot of young men go through where you're reading like self-help or like personal development.
World War II.
I want to level up my life, blah, 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 that bullshit. We talk about our shortcomings as readers all the time. We just simply have not had the time, I don't think, in our reading lives. You're younger than me, so maybe, you know, you can get away with saying that more than I can, but like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't put much emphasis on that blind spot, like, or like, I don't put much weight on like, ooh, I got to fix this, because I know that I will eventually.
Right.
I'm just doing some other stuff right now.
Right. If someone, you know, thinks that I should need to read more books by women.
Yep.
And wants to cover my salary, I will quit my job and read not exclusively, but we'll spend.
He has limits, folks.
But we'll read.
Yeah.
More books. I will spend the next year reading mostly books written by women.
Yeah.
To appease you and check off your box and meet your quota.
But until
then, I have a limited amount of time to read.
Yeah.
And you know what? It wasn't written by a woman, but Gesell Dome is fucking awesome.
Was it translated by a woman?
Maybe.
Oh, Andrew, you don't know the translator?
Yeah, well, I don't know the translator. It was translated by a woman because I got it in Open Letters Women in Translation sale.
Let's look it up.
So I'm going to read that. And if it makes you upset because it was originally written by a man, that's your problem, not mine.
Yes, it was translated by Andrea G. Labinger. If you have literally only ever read a very narrow range of genres, time periods, or authors, just for your own sake,
right?
There's just so many great books out there that are so different from one another.
Go down the rabbit holes.
Yeah.
But if the rabbit hole leads you to Gravity's Rainbow, and then through that, Moby Dick and Rilke and whoever, you're still reading more diversely than the guy who only reads the same fantasy novels over and over.
Right.
But what I'm getting at is to go back to using Passing as an example.
Mm-hmm. Which is a top 10 or 20 book for me all time. It's a great book.
Right. And you've already kind of, tried to sell me on it today. But if you came up to me and you were like, hey, Andy, I read this book about this woman in Harlem's experiences during segregation, and it was a phenomenal book, and it was really eye-opening, and it changed my perspective on a lot of things and educated me on a lot of things, I would be interested in it. Mm-hmm. And I am interested in it, but I would presumably make more of an effort to seek it out and want to read it, versus if you were like, you haven't read Passing yet? You are an ignorant piece of shit.
Right.
Shut up.
So
dude.
that going back to the book talk thing I mentioned earlier, you know how I am. I like to be a little controversial. So I respect that this person put it out there and ruffled some feathers. I didn't necessarily agree with the take, but it's fine. They're allowed to their perspective. One thing I thought was a little ridiculous though was after the fact there was a lot of rebuttals and follow-up points and all this stuff, and people had said like, oh, these white men are triggered because someone tried to encourage them to read more diversely. That's not how encouragement works, guys.
Yeah.
Browbeating is not that to me, that's effectively like saying like fat shaming someone is encouraging them to lose weight. There's really not a lot of data to support that claim. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of data to show that shaming somebody. I mean, I'm sure it does happen in every scenario, but like that's not encouragement. Encouragement would be like, hey, I've noticed this trend on Book Talk where a lot of people are reading kind of the same books by the same authors, and there's just not a lot of diversity there. So here's some books that if you like these 5 books, here are some wildly different books that you would probably also like. That's encouragement.
Right.
Encouragement isn't your videos suck, you lack emotional intelligence. That's browbeating,
Right.
And again, I'm not passing judgment. This creator can make any content that they want. Go for it. So last question, and then we'll wrap things up. Looking back on the last few years of your reading, what do you think is the common denominator in all of the books that you've really liked? And it can be more than one thing. So this person had asked this question: what is it that you like about certain books? So if you had to kind of define it, because I think like people who strictly read like fantasy or strictly read sci-fi, you tend to get answers from those people. Not always, but sometimes you get like, it's just an escape for me, which is fine. It's a totally fine reason to read. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I have a harder time like looking at all of the books that I really, really like and seeing exactly what the overlap is, because there's not a lot. But
there's not a lot for me. I think, obviously, I've said before, with a lot of what I read, the plot is not the point. But I always appreciate a strong narrative, a good narrative. But I think for me, of the books that I've really enjoyed over the last few years, it kind of comes back to this idea that I talked about last week, I think, when we were answering questions. And I certainly kind of use this as a reference in more than just reading. But I call it the Jimmy V idea, right?
yeah,
They make me think, they make me laugh, and they move my emotions. And there are certainly men that accomplish that write in English. There are women that write in English that accomplish that. There are men that write in other languages that accomplish that. There are women that write in other languages that accomplish that.
Yeah.
And that is what, at the end of the day, what I'm looking for in a book.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who wrote it, what the author's background or inalienable qualities are. Will it make me think? Can it make me laugh? Will it move me emotionally? Will it do at least one of those things?
Yeah.
Hopefully more.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. And I think these two books that I read yesterday are great examples, Minor Detail and Train Dreams. I mean,
those two authors could not be more different.
Right. Vastly different authors, vastly different stories and subject matter, but both those books did what you just described. Not a whole lot of laughter in Minor Detail. But yeah, I really struggle with kind of tying it all together for myself as well. I've talked about this before, but one thing I found is like, I do tend to gravitate towards books that are more about ideas than individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So How to Quiet a Vampire by Borislav Pekic is a great example. I mean, yes, it's about a former Gestapo officer and he's writing the series of letters kind of recounting his war crimes, but like, it's not really about him. Mm-hmm. It's about the Holocaust, and it's about the psychological failings and manipulations of the Nazis.
Right.
Same thing with Minor Detail. You never know any of the characters' names. There's a third-person narrative in the first half. There's a first-person narrative in the second half. They take place in different time periods. There's basically just two characters. There's the soldier in the first part, and then there's the woman, the Palestinian woman in the second part. So it's technically about them, but it's not. It's
right.
about the greater events surrounding it. You
right.
know, the formation of Israel, and then modern day life in Palestine. Like those are the themes of the book. They're not about these people. So I tend to gravitate towards books like that. And I tend to like, I've enjoyed a lot of funny books. And one of my favorite books is a very funny book, Catch-22, but I tend to like more serious books. So, Andrew, is there anything else you want to say about this topic?
I don't know. Just read what you want to read and leave people alone if they don't fit in your box. Like,
I will have to say thank you to this person because it did lead to, I think, a
fruitful discussion.
Right.
Like you said earlier, it came from a place of good faith.
Right.
This person was certainly trying to encourage us.
Yes.
There was some browbeating, some criticism. But,
I do believe we were called lazy and sexist in this email, but that's okay.
You know,
I'll let it slide.
There are plenty of times in my life where I've been at least one of those things.
Yeah, of course. Among late for dinner. So.
Right. But you know what? Like, just read what you want to read. And unless people are actually attacking marginalized and vulnerable people,
right?
Who cares? You know, like, yes, you can criticize either one of us for not reading as many books written by women as you would like. And maybe that's true. Maybe we haven't read enough books written by women. Maybe you and I could benefit from doing 3 months straight of only reading women. But we're not up here punching down and talking about women in general.
Right. We're not saying women can't write or people of color can't write.
Or saying women can't write or saying that books written by women suck or that people that mostly read books written by women are idiots and they're not getting the same out of their reading that we are. Mm-hmm. We're just reading books that we like and talking about them.
Yeah. I will counter that slightly. Don't read what you want to read. Read the books that we talk about, which are linked down below. And when you purchase them through those links, we get about 50 cents per book. So if you want to support the show, purchasing the books that we talk about through those links is a way to do that. But a better way is joining our Patreon book club. The link is also below, where there's about 300 people in the club with very diverse tastes.
Plenty of women, I might add.
I would say we are probably about just about 50-50, maybe slightly more women than men in the club.
There is additional screening if you are a woman, so be prepared for that.
Yes. All right. Well, next week we are talking about books, so make sure to join us, and thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.